So hi everyone, welcome to the Hispanic Heritage Month um, Education Abroad Student Panel. This panel is entitled Me Abroad, Encountering the World and Overcoming Challenges. And we have two students who will be sharing their experience on their study abroad program to help you to understand how you too can study abroad. Before we get started, our panelists will be Joel Fuentes, who is a fourth-year bioethics major. He's also majoring in political science and Spanish, and he studied abroad at the National University of Singapore in fall of 2019. We also have joined with us Benjamin George. He is a third-year electrical engineering and business management major. He studied abroad at the University of Auckland, spring of 2020. So you might be wondering, like, why should I study abroad? Like, what is really the point? Well, the point about studying abroad is that it really does give you a competitive edge. Employers really see graduates who demonstrate that they can work across cultures, they understand international systems, languages and policies, and they have strong interpersonal and communication skills, and also they have demonstrated initiative and creative thinking. And studying abroad helps you to hone in on those essential skills. Now, this study was done in 2009. It was a survey of about 200 CEOs, and 90% of the senior managers reported that they themselves had studied abroad during their academic career. Another thing that really distinguishes you and gives you a competitive edge in study abroad is that really there's only like 1 in 10 US undergrads who study abroad, which is phenomenally low. But it helps you to differentiate yourself. When you graduate and you're looking for those jobs, you're definitely going to want to put your study abroad experience on there. The exposure that you've had is phenomenally beneficial. And we'll talk about that from a personal perspective. You know, the study abroad experience helps you to meet other people and make connections with people around the world that you just would not be able to do that if you just stayed on campus your entire time here. Also, in the UC Merced 2018 study, they found that about 90 to 97% of students who studied abroad landed a job within the first 6 months of graduation. And also about 90% of the alumni got their first or second choice in graduate school. And about 80% reported that they were better able to adapt to diverse work environments. And that's because they really were able to stretch themselves through their study abroad experience, encountering ambiguity and navigating the nuances of the culture. The alumni also reported that about 97% reported that their study abroad did help to increase their maturity. So they also tend to come back a little bit more confident as well. I like to say, you know, students that study abroad throughout my career, they just come back totally transformed by their experience. Here at Case, about 31% of undergrads study abroad, and we have here just about 5 top locations. You can see, although you can study abroad anywhere in the world, the top favorites here at Case, students like to go to the UK or Spain or South Korea, Denmark, and Australia, but they also go to other countries as well. And just about every major does study abroad. And if you've been wondering, well, can I study abroad as an engineer? You'll hear from Benjamin, who is an engineer major, in just a minute. Absolutely, you can study abroad as an engineer. But our anthropology students, our biomedical students, our biology students, econ, international studies, psychology students, and many more, literally, we're able to place our students from any major in the world. And now we're going to ask Joel Fuentes. Again, he studied abroad at National University of Singapore in fall of 2019. Joel, can you share with us some of the amazing things that you encountered when you were in Singapore?
Yes. Hello, everybody. Hope you're having a good day. So, uh, yeah, I guess I'll start off with my application process really quick. I didn't expect to ever study abroad. I kind of just filled out an application on a whim, and one thing led to the next, and the next thing I knew, I was in Singapore because it just became very feasible. So I guess I have a more flexible degree plan with political science and Spanish. So I was able to fit it in my junior year to go and study. And I really had an interest in public health. So I was really interested in looking at health systems from, I guess, an outside point of view. So in Singapore, they have, their own health system. They handle health insurance differently and even combine different healthcare approaches. Um, so when I went, I was pretty pleasantly surprised because it's actually pretty comparable to CASE in terms of course workload and professors. And as you may know, Singapore is an English speaking country for the most part. So all the classes were in English, the university is in English. Um, so there was no language barrier, which is one of the things I really looked for personally when looking for university to study at. So it was either London or Singapore for me, um, partially because I already am studying Spanish, so I didn't necessarily want to go somewhere Spanish speaking. Um, but yeah, just a little bit about why I chose to go to Singapore.
And could you talk about some of the connections that you made while you were in Singapore?
Yeah, so one of the interesting things about Singapore is that it actually has a pretty big study abroad network, I would say, like nationally across the US. We don't often hear about people going to study abroad, but I think, I don't remember the exact figure, but it was about, I think they said about 1,000. There was about 1,000 other study abroad students at my university since it's such a large university. So a lot of my classes were like half study abroad students from Belgium, from France. There was people from Japan. Also, NUS has certain programs with Japan, a lot of partnerships across the US and the world. So here in this picture, I made some friends with some people from California, actually. So it just so happened that I met some other Hispanic students from California. So we really made that connection. And I just really enjoyed meeting people from all over the world.
Awesome. Did you notice anything different, like in the teaching style or the expectations of the faculty? Can you share with us also, what was the academic rigor like? Was it easy? Was it hard?
Yeah. So I would say thankfully it was pretty similar to Case. So it's pretty much a large lecture hall. You have your professor, they lecture at you, they assign readings, and they're actually pretty approachable, and they don't have office hours, which is something that's different from the US. So you kind of just have to schedule an appointment with them on your own if you want to work with them. But I guess I'll tell you just the approach I took to taking courses was at first when I went, I had really a serious set of courses that I wanted to take. Like this one is going to count for my political science major. This one's going to count for my Spanish major, my bioethics major. But then once I got there, I kind of, I don't know, I thought about it in a different way in terms of I'm coming to this university because I want to take courses that are not necessarily offered back at Case. So that's one of the big advantages of studying abroad. So I switched up my schedule, and I think that was a really good choice on my part. So I ended up taking a class in philosophy, a class on ghosts and spirits as it pertains to Southeast Asia, and I also took a public health class. So, um, in terms of courses, I will say they're pretty hard. NUS is, I think, one of the most rigorous schools in the world, and they kind of pride themselves in that. Um, But the good thing is our it's kind of a pass-fail grading scale for when we transfer our grades back to case. So I wouldn't say people were failing, but I would say that really helped in helping my credits come back and in choosing classes that I wanted to take.
Yes. Well, let me ask you this. What about the getting your courses approved before you studied abroad or while you were there? How did that work for you?
Mhm. So Singapore, or well, I guess NUS, the National University of Singapore, is really good in that they have a really large database of syllabi, sorry, from any course that you would like to take. So you can go ahead and preview all the syllabi from any class that sounds interesting to you. You can email the professor, and there's even a study abroad coordinator that deals with students that are coming from the US at Singapore. So I was in contact with him a lot. And they do, of course, like any other university, give preference to their own students in terms of choosing courses first. But if there are spaces in a course that you really would like to take, such as a programming language or something that has a prerequisite, they're pretty flexible. You can work with them and they'll let you join that class if that's what you want to do.
Okay. Can you share with us, like, how did you afford to study abroad?
Yeah, so that's one thing, I guess that's one reason why I never thought I would study abroad is partially because I always considered it to be really expensive to do, especially in somewhere like Singapore. But actually, Singapore was one of the more affordable schools on the list of places to study abroad, which is kind of counterintuitive because Singapore is an expensive country to live in. Um, but I know the study abroad office, they had put out a scholarship, I think the Think Global Study Abroad Scholarship. So I applied to that one. Thankfully, I was able to get some money from them. But also, I guess if you have an academic scholarship at Case, your tuition kind of is covered by that same academic scholarship that you have. So if your tuition is less than what it would be at Case, they kind of handle that difference. So that's how I was able to make it feasible. I basically had to worry about my flight and meals, and it made it a lot more feasible to go for me.
Great. I have one of your photos up here. Can you tell us about the experience you had in this market?
Yeah, so
Some of the other cultural things that you did?
so the interesting thing about Singapore, and mind you, I just kind of went with no expectations on purpose because I didn't want to have any preconceived notions. I just said I'm going to go and see what it's about. But Singapore is kind of prides itself on being multicultural, so it's very much in everywhere you go. It's Chinese culture, Indian, South Indian culture, and Malaysian culture. So this is a market called Haji Lane, and it's kind of the buildings are very Peranakan, which is like it's a subculture of Malaysia that's a mixture of Malay culture and Chinese culture. So everything there from food to fashion is kind of inspired by these three cultures. So I really enjoyed that part of Singapore. Um, but yeah, I on the other hand, I will say there really aren't any like in Thailand, for example, there aren't any like old historic markets that you can go to. Things are pretty organized in Singapore, so they'll have like a market district, or this is the fashion district, this is the shopping district. So in that sense, you kind of always know where you're at because Singapore organizes their city in such a organized way.
I'm going to go back a slide to the photo that was on your intro page. Can you tell us a little bit about, um, your experience at this location?
Yeah, so this is basically in the city center. So in the city center, there's a hotel called the Marina Bay Sands Hotel, which you can kind of see the very corner, the left, the very tall building. Um, and I think that hotel comes out in like Crazy Rich Asians, for example. Um, it's a very popular hotel, but um, behind me is a mall, and that's also just a really popular mall. And then on that body of water, they do water shows. Um, So if you've been to Singapore, if you're going to Singapore, you have to go to the city center. You have to pass by that mall. You have to see that water show, and it's a really great view of all the skyscrapers in the city.
It looks amazing. It really does. I'm going to forward your slides to this location. Tell us
Mhm.
about that.
Oh, yeah. So that's, I think it's called the Butterfly Dome. So actually, kind of behind that Marina Bay Sands Hotel is something called it's not the Botanical Gardens. It's called, I forget the name. I think it's called the Marina Bay Gardens or something. But they have these huge domes that are basically greenhouses, and they're several stories high, and you can go visit, and they have all the plants you can think of. I think they even have like a light show. Um, and it's just a really, really beautiful gardens that they set up. And that's where, if you've heard of Singapore, you probably heard of those huge trees. And I think those come out, and I'm using Crazy Rich Asians as a reference just because that's really popular in pop culture. Um, but the wedding scene at the end where they're having a wedding party and there's kind of like it seems like a really beautiful garden, that's where it happens.
Oh,
So that's kind of why I went there. It's kind of like one of the main attractions of Singapore. Like I said, since a lot of historic buildings and museums are kind of they've been reconstructed in Singapore, a lot of the tourism there is to their new buildings and to their newest attractions and newest gardens. Um, so going to that garden is really awesome, and I really would recommend it.
it looks absolutely stunning. Joel, can you tell us what advice would you give to our listeners today who are thinking about studying abroad and perhaps even thinking about going to Singapore? From your experience and all the things that you gained from your study abroad in Singapore, what would you say to the student who's listening right now about studying abroad?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I would say is to just go ahead and fill out an application. That's the most daunting part of the process. That's what I did. I went out, filled out an application, submitted it. And then once you have that out of the way, I think it makes it a lot more feasible in your mind. But in terms of picking somewhere to go, I know a lot of people like to go to Europe or they like to go to Latin America. And Singapore is not really on their list of places to go, but I actually really, really enjoyed it, and I'm really thankful that I went to Singapore because it's so different. It's so close to Thailand or Malaysia or even Hong Kong. So these are places that are really beautiful, but they often get overlooked by Paris, more iconic locations. Um, and then on top of that, Singapore is super safe. That's one thing that I can say it has an advantage over any other country. It's the safest country in the world, I think it was voted. Um, so you leave your computer at the library, no one's going to take it. Or you, you throw a piece of gum on the floor. Well, that's not allowed. So you will never see a piece of gum on the floor. So if you're looking for a really clean and really high tech place to go, I think Singapore, you can't miss it.
Awesome. Thank you, Joel. Looks like you really had an amazing experience in Singapore. Now we're going to hear from Benjamin George, who studied abroad at the University of Auckland in New Zealand, and you can see him there spring of 2020. So Joel, tell us a little bit about your experience while you were in Auckland. And as you know, COVID-19 did happen while you were there. So
Yeah, so I went to the University of Auckland, and so it was interesting because Auckland, being in the another hemisphere, they have a very different academic calendar, and so I didn't leave to start um, even school till the beginning of March. So this was just the beginning of COVID, before it was really a pandemic, so to speak. So I was had a very, I would say, interesting and unique experience, just given the whole dynamics. So I was actually only in New Zealand for just a little over a month, but during that month, I really took advantage of so many different things that New Zealand had to offer. So Auckland is the largest city in New Zealand. So New Zealand is divided up into two large islands, and I was on the northern island and in their most populated area. And so it's a very, very multicultural city. And I think it was really cool to experience and seeing the blend similar to Singapore in that sense. But during that time, I was able to go and participate in sailing and in the same bay that the Olympic national team for New Zealand competed in. So I got to see them practice, and it was cool as they passed us as I was learning to sail. New Zealand's on the water, and it's a very adventurous city, country. And New Zealand, the city of Auckland, is known as the city of sails. So when I went, I knew I was going to try sailing. And then I also used to row in high school. And so when I went, they had this whole competition between all the colleges in New Zealand. And it was a rowing competition to a dormant volcano off the coast. And so it was a 5K row from the beach, the shores, to the island. And then you run up the dormant volcano, you run back down, then you row back. And so I was practicing and training with a group of students and other New Zealanders, or as they refer to themselves as Kiwis. So I really think I had a really cool experience, but it was definitely cut short because of COVID.
Thank you. Seems like you did so much in your short time that you were there. I'm going to forward your slides. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the cool things that you did while you were there?
Yeah, so I think one of the major selling points of New Zealand is just the beautiful environment and landscapes. There's so many different amazing and jaw-dropping just terrains and to see. And so this photo was part of, so when I joined, I guess backtracking, they have a bunch of clubs. And so it was interesting because while I went to the second semester at Case to study abroad, it was the first semester in New Zealand. So I think that afforded a lot of unique opportunities because I was in freshman orientation, and the freshman orientation and study abroad orientation is during the same time. So I was with everyone new, everyone was coming back. There were all these clubs and fairs. And so one of the clubs they have there is whitewater rafting and kayaking. And so this trip, they go hiking, and and they call it tramping, but camping is a huge element of the culture there. And there's campsites throughout the entire country, really affordable. And so I went with about 100 students, really, really affordable. It was like $20 for the weekend to go and go hiking, see huge waterfalls, and then go kayaking. And so here you can see is we were tenting and camping. And in the background, those are geothermal springs. So it was cool because we would swim and the water would be really warm because of the geothermal. There was a geothermal plant right over there.
Awesome. And what about this trip that you took?
Yeah, so this was me sailing. And so both of the one holding the camera was our instructor, and she was from France. And the other two, the girl was from Sweden, and the gentleman over there was from Brazil. And so it just goes to show that New Zealand brings a lot of really cool people together. And so this was actually sponsored by the university. And so the university has a whole water sports team. And so these were sailing lessons that I took at a really, really affordable price. And that was me learning how to sail. And we actually, that day, we tipped the sailboat over because we had to practice capsizing and then getting back up. And so it was definitely a really, really cool experience. That was on Wednesday, so I would have class in the mornings, and then I would scooter or bike down because they have electric bikes and scooters all throughout the city that you can take. And I went down to the University Yacht Club, and there I would have practice with the rowing team and then also have the sailing lessons all on the same day.
Incredible. I know you did some other things too. Do you want to touch on this day at the beach?
Yes, so this was all these students were other international students. So I think one of the really cool parts about studying abroad is everyone, similar to I think with NUS, is that New Zealand, University of Auckland has a really big international student population, and so there were a lot of other study abroad students from all over the world. And so this is these are them, but because everyone is new, everyone also wants to explore and do things. So we met during the first 2 weeks and we assembled a group together, and there's it was an island off the coast. And so we went to the beach there and explored. There were all these different amenities and different things to explore on the island. That was really cool. And so it's nice to, I think, meet people, and also um, all from different parts of the world, and like interact and see how they view things. I think that's the best part about studying abroad, is just you get a really new perspective, not just on your country you're studying in, but also I think normally you interact with a lot of different people and seeing from around the world, and you get to see how they view things and whatnot.
And this day looks like did some rafting on this
Yeah, so
day.
that was from the camping trip that I went on. So that was the previous, but from the camping photo. But yeah, so you can see how like the water is pristine. They pride themselves as a country on being very sustainable, and everywhere you go, there's everything's listed based on the sustainability goals of the United Nations. So businesses, government, um, every aspect of life is connecting back to these goals, which I think is very different in the United States. So you get to see how they're really incorporating this as part of a cultural aspect into their life. But yeah, I've never done this, and they had all these really professionals that were there with us, and coaches that went, and alumni of the university. So you have to really interact with both people older and also other locals, as well as other students your age, which was fun. This was really safe, and you could actually swim through this. So a bunch of us actually got out and swam through it. And it was really cool to swim because it just pulls you out into this open, huge basin that's further down to the right.
Yeah, looks amazing.
Yeah.
Benjamin, can you talk to us or share with us, what were your classes like at the University of Auckland? I know there are students on this Zoom call today who may be thinking about going to New Zealand, but what were some of the differences that you encountered, like being in the class there, or even the kinds of classes that you took?
Yeah, so in New Zealand, they have a different grading policy. So numerically, the grading policy doesn't align with ours directly. And so their GPA scale is actually on a 9.0 as opposed to a 4.0. So that was really interesting. And they have like grade conversions of where things correspond back to us. But the classes there tend to meet less frequent. So you'll maybe only have one class a week, but longer. And also from a grading perspective as well, it's very common to only just have a midterm and a final, and those are your grades. So I had 2 classes that were dependent on just 2 tests. And so in that sense, it's different than case, because typically you have like homework or participation or labs, as well as tests and quizzes. And so that I think was definitely a shell shock. But the thing about studying abroad is things are pass fail. And so when you're taking classes, it's on a pass fail. Did you pass the class or not? And then the credits will transfer back to case.
Yeah, so for your program, how did you find the professors, like in terms of what their expectations were of students? You mentioned that you only met like once a week for your classes, which is very different. Sounds like you really had to be super independent and very disciplined to stay
Yeah.
on track with all of your assignments. But what were some of the expectations that your faculty had that you can compare to here at Case?
So I think I definitely had I think a difficult time trying to connect, I think, with some of the professors, just because I was there such a short period of time, and you just the frequency of which you met. I had two classes where I had a lab, and I also had there was a recitation review session, which was really helpful. But definitely, yeah. So I was definitely emailing the professors while I was there, and I set up office hours. They're really nice. Uh, Kiwis, as they refer to themselves, are extremely, really compassionate, kind. It's a really core aspect of how they identify themselves. It's so, I guess, as New Zealand, it's a bicultural society. So while the city of Auckland is very multicultural, the country as a whole is um, is bicultural. So it's a former English colony, and so there's that Western influence. But then also there's the indigenous people called the Maori, and that is a huge, huge aspect of the culture, and it pervades both public policy, governing documents, and so while we sometimes reference the Constitution there, they have a treaty that they reference, and so that treaty is referenced in, as like a cultural thing, and part of that was like a compassion, do what onto yourself with others. So they're definitely very personable, and which was really nice. So I think my professors were really nice, but it was just, I think, from the timing perspective, a little bit difficult to connect.
Yeah, so thank you for sharing that. What were some of the challenges that you encountered just trying to study abroad? Like, how did you find it?
Yeah, so I actually was actually trying to go to Singapore. So I am an electrical engineer. I switched from mechanical, but I always knew that I was going to study abroad when I came to Case. That was a big aspect of my decision making when I was looking at universities. And so I looked at universities that had the ability to study abroad for engineers. And Singapore is a very tech and very tech focused, engineering focused school, as well as just a top notch school. And so I was originally looking at schools that had the ability first for me to be able to do engineering courses. And I was unique in the sense that I didn't want to do any elective courses. So I think you have much more flexibility when you're studying abroad if you choose to use the courses you take as your electives. And I decided not to because I wanted to continue with my degree when I was studying abroad. And so I think that was a self-imposed limitation I put on myself. And so when I was looking at schools, that I had to make sure that I was maintaining my degree within engineering, because you have a very strict process that you need to follow in terms of grades and prereq requirements for classes. And so I applied actually to go to Singapore. Joel and I actually would have gone together. But I realized that some of my classes, there was caps on some of them. And so I wasn't able to take all the classes that I needed, as well as my housing for the University of Singapore. There was issues with that. And so I wasn't able to actually go, and housing in New Zealand, in Singapore, if you're off campus, I think was a little difficult for me to swing, and because it's a city state, and so the housing prices can be very expensive. So I started the process again, and because I was committed to studying abroad, and I then looked at New Zealand. New Zealand was also one of my top considerations when I was looking at to Singapore, and it was much easier to get classes, in my opinion, at least for an engineering perspective, and that aligned with my courses. And so it was very difficult because I wanted to make sure that I had a number of classes that I could fall back on, because I didn't know when I think a difficult aspect of when you're trying to pick classes for studying abroad is you don't sometimes know what the times are for when classes are going to be taught. And so you sign up for a class, but there could be conflicts. And so because it was also business major, I had classes at both in the business school as well as the engineering school if I was going to go to either university. And sometimes they conflicted because they're not designed. I think normally it's not common as much to, I think, do multiple degrees abroad. That was a big thing that I noticed. And so from that sense, I got a lot of extra classes approved. So you have something that you can fall back on if things were to change. So I recommend that for if you're going to study abroad. I recommend not just going for the classes that you think you're going to be able to take or like you want to take. You should definitely go and try to get extras. And so I think that helped me a lot.
That's really good advice. Benjamin, can you tell us, like, what are some of your takeaways? I know you were not there very long, but what was particularly impactful for you being in New Zealand?
So I think the biggest thing was just the amount of things to do. And so I really took advantage of trying to do everything I could, exploring. Similar to Singapore, Auckland had a specific districts. And so there was like an Indian district, the Chinatown district, more like Thai, Southeast Asian, a Latin district. And so there was all these different things to explore within the city. But then I also really enjoyed being able to meet up with students and being able to travel on the weekends and do things. And I think the biggest takeaway was just the obvious was dealing with COVID. And so for me, New Zealand was very proactive and organized in dealing with COVID. And so I think that really defined my whole study abroad experience in a unique way that I think traditional study abroad experiences. And so when I actually arrived in New Zealand, I had to sign forms, and we were getting briefings and presentations about COVID. We were getting daily updates on testing and contact tracing. The country as a whole had a pandemic action plan already put in place in 2017 that was recently updated. The university that I was going to had a pandemic action plan that was already being operated on and a task force. And so they were very organized and structured. The other thing from a culture perspective is they really look at things holistically. And so as part of their compassion, like they don't I think look at things through a myopic lens sometimes that I think sometimes we can in the United States, and they try to look at many external factors. The other thing is they're a very inclusive society. And so that's a major aspect. And so everywhere you would go, you would see signs talking about in public about making like potentially racism and like being like an active anti-racist citizen, whether it be racism, transphobia, homophobia, class, like they're very aware of like social and economic factors and being really inclusive and understanding around that. And that I think was a really interesting time because when I came back, I had a group of students I was working with as part of my business school, and we were talking about at this time the racial justice movement in the United States was really starting to become impactful following George Floyd and Breonna Taylor, and discussing that aspects where they don't really even have that as a major consideration factor, and it was that was really interesting.
Wow, that really does sound amazing. Right now, thank you so much, Benjamin and Joel. Right now, we want to hear from those of you who are out there on the Zoom call. You may have questions. Camille Ross has joined us today. She's sort of in the background monitoring the questions. She is also the study abroad advisor for NUS in Singapore. So if you would like to study there, please reach out to Camille Ross. Camille, do we have any questions at this point?
Actually, I sent you some messages, but we've been having issues with Facebook Live. So we are recording this and we'll post it later, but we won't be getting any specific questions from there. Maybe the people in here have some questions.
Okay. All right. So I did have a few questions for you all. and I think Joel, you already mentioned this, but Benjamin, did you have how was your experience with the application process for your program? Can you
Yeah,
touch on
so
that a little bit?
definitely. So it was actually the application for going to New Zealand, I think, was relatively easy for me. You pretty much just answered a couple questions, said what classes you wanted to take, and sent it in. And I actually had more difficulty with my housing in both universities. And so that was a thing that I had to really follow up on, and I had conversations with them. And so that was difficult. But the actual application process was, I think, really cut and dry. The biggest thing for me was the academics and just handling course approvals and making sure that I was maintaining degree requirements for engineering.
I see. Well, thank you both. I'm going to just kind of turn to maybe some other topics in study abroad that may be interesting to you. You may want to know more about. And one of the things that I want to mention is that you can study abroad on a long-term program for a semester or academic year. You may be wondering what's available to me. And also you can do a faculty-led program. And at this point, I am going to ask Dr. Damaris Puñales Alpizar, who runs a program to Cuba, to talk a little bit about her program.
Hey, hi everyone. Thanks, Angela, for inviting me to be part of the panel. I'm really glad to be here and talking about the program that we have in Cuba every summer. Hopefully next summer we'll be able to offer the same program. It all, of course, will depend on how the pandemic will be at that point. Basically, we offer a program in Cuba every summer, and we have been offering this program since 2012 every year. And we take students to Cuba for 3 weeks at the end of the spring semester. So either at the last 3 weeks of May or actually including also the first week of June. And we stayed there for 3 weeks, 2 weeks in Matanzas and 1 week in Havana. We have a lot of activities there. And as I always tell my students when we are talking about this program, one of the main goals for studying abroad is being fully immersed in another culture and in another language, because somehow it helps you to open your mind to other views and perspective and ways of people living their lives in other places. And especially in the case of Cuba, this is very important because there is no another way of traveling to Cuba right now other than through an academic program. Of course, if you have a family in Cuba, you can also travel, but the only way to legally travel to Cuba right now is through an academic program. So in that sense, it's very important because this is the only way that students and future leaders of this country and this world will have of knowing how the Cuban society actually is. There is a lot of misinformation. There is a lot of misunderstanding about what is Cuba, how Cubans live, and being there, being in contact with Cubans directly, it can shape the way that you have of seeing actual Cuba. So we have this program and we take classes. I mean, I teach the classes every day in the morning, and every afternoon we have like workshops, talks by Cuban faculty or Cuban artists. Students also work with Cuban dancers, and there is also a theater company that we work with. So we travel around the island a little bit. Cuba is an island, but it's not that small, so we only travel to half of the island. We usually travel to Havana. We spend a week in Havana. We go to the University of Havana, to different institutions in Havana also. And then in Matanzas, we travel to the Museum of Slavery. And then we go south to the province of Matanzas, to the Bay of Pigs. That probably is a familiar name for many US citizens. And we stay there traveling around over the weekends, but in the during the week, we have classes every day in the mornings, and in the afternoon, we visit museums, and we go to the theater, we go to the cinema. So students get an opportunity to get in contact with Cuban people directly, working and studying with them. And in that sense, I feel that it's a very unique program. So far, it's the only faculty-led program that we have in a Spanish-speaking country. And in that sense, also, I think that it's an opportunity for the students to go there. If you have any more questions, feel free to contact me. Hopefully, as I told you at the beginning, we'll be able to offer this program next summer. If not, we'll have to wait at least another year to see what happens with the coronavirus. But that's basically the general information about the program. Also, because of the nature of the traveling to Cuba, we travel together as a group. So we departure from here or from Canada together as a group, and we return together as well. It's not as any other program that you can travel on your own. So in that sense, it's kind of a different way of doing things, but it has to do with the policies implemented and in place by the US government and also by the Cuban government. So it's a unique opportunity. Don't lose it if you have a chance to go, and let me know if you have any more questions. And if you have any more specific questions, Angela, I'll be happy to answer them.
Well, thank you so much, Dr. Punales Alpizar. I do have a couple questions for Benjamin and Joel, and if you would, you could take turns with this. One question from one of our viewers is, how did you implement what you learned studying abroad when you got back to Case, continuing your studies here?
I'll go first. So I think for me I think you definitely learn, I think, more about yourself just as a person and how you handle conflict and new situations, right? I think that's like a major aspect of studying abroad. You're going as a young adult and you're going completely into a new culture and a new experience, and you have to juggle a lot of different things: finances, travel, like food, accommodations, academics, and then also just your own personal enjoyment, whether it be activities, going to things, meeting new people. And so I think you definitely naturally just are forced out of your comfort zone, which I think is a really good thing. And so I think as studying abroad, I think one, you get a really new sense of who you are as a person. You become, I think, more confident and self-assured, I think, in who you are as a person. And then you also get a much more global perspective. And so I think, as I mentioned in my introduction, I think we tend to be very myopic in our way of thinking and how we approach things, just because of how we grow up, right? You grow up surrounded by people with similar mindsets and cultures and friends and family, right? And so I think by going abroad, you see and interacting with people from all over the world in a new culture, you have a much wider viewpoint of how problems happen, solutions to them, how things happen. And I think that is a really important skill set to have, that I think is universally applied to when you come back to Case and just for the future.
Thank you, Benjamin. Do you want to take a shot at that, Joel?
Yeah, that was really well said. So I don't think I can top that. But I will say I find myself in my classes, since I'm doing bioethics, I'm in the IGS program, so things related to pre-health and pre-med. I find myself in class reading something that I can relate back to my time in Singapore or something I learned in those classes. And I really, really appreciate that perspective, because especially if you're pre-health or pre-med, all of your education is going to be based on what we know as Western biomedicine. So studying abroad in a country like Singapore that also places an emphasis on something like Chinese traditional medicine and everyday things such as, how you're feeling are based on those traditions as well. So just for an example, if you're feeling hot, they say you need to drink this certain type of drink, which is known as a cooling drink or a heaty drink. So there's a lot of dualism in their culture, and now in my bioethics program, we talking about, you know, cultural relativism and cultural pluralism and different medical systems and ethnomedicine and all of these things I kind of was able to see in person. And I just really, really appreciate my time there because I was able to do that. And also my class on ghosts and spirits, I just kind of took it for fun. I didn't think it would ever come back, but that's anthropology if you think about it. It's medical anthropology. A lot of ways that they treat illness is through a shaman, you know, in Malaysia, in rural Malaysia. So those perspectives were just really unique and helpful for me.
That's awesome. It sounds like it also impacts your everyday, right? Is there a day that goes by that you don't think about, you know, what the experience was like there, or maybe do you ever want to go back?
Definitely with me. I did not get to see as much as I wanted to see. I had actually a 2-week break that I was supposed to have, and I was going to go to the South Islands, which I didn't get to visit. And so I think that's another thing is I think with study abroad, right, is I think is like it finishes, and I think just because I think so many people have such an enjoyable time and it's so impactful on them, they want to do it again. They want to travel. They want to do things. So I think that's definitely a big part.
Awesome. Okay, we have another question. Is there any advice you would give to another student on their first week of studying abroad?
Do you want to go? Okay. That's a good question. I think for me, I definitely am someone that I think I'm very organized and methodical in how I do things. And so I think like some tips I think for like settling in your first week is understanding, I think, how you're gonna like just like your day-to-day things. Because I think before you, like for me, I took like a whole week just to do things by myself. Really, I think the first week, like I during orientation and whatnot, I would do things as a group, but I wanted to do things and explore kind of on my own and do things and see things without being limited, I think, by like with other people. But to each their own. But I think one of the big things is understanding like how you're gonna spend, like just from like a finance perspective. So I highly recommend that you get. I had a credit card, and I made sure to get something with 0 international transaction fees, which I think is critical. And so I was still able to use my home bank and then just pay off my credit card and wasn't charged extra. It was really nice to buy things in New Zealand because the currency exchange rate was in favor of the dollar. That's a perk of the dollar hegemony, and the power of the dollar is like everything was like 40% off. The other thing is I would highly recommend trying to join a Facebook group or a large group chat with a lot of different other study abroad students, because you can, one, meet people, and two, you really, I think whenever you study abroad, you want to go on adventures, right? You want to see and do things that are relevant to the culture, and you can do it with people. You want to do it with people, and it makes it more fun, it makes it more enjoyable. And I think by joining a group, our group chat was huge. It had like 500 people in it, and people would just post things like, hey, going here, like, does anyone want to go? And you can choose to like go or not, depending on if you have time. The other thing is, I think like look up grocery stores. That was like a small thing like I didn't think of, but like I needed food. And so I had to like search and like figure out how to get there. So like transportation and like how you're gonna get from point A to point B, like within the area you're in, to get core necessities. But yeah, I think, and also just going with an open mind, go with the flow, because things will happen. I had like that less than I think like a week and a half in, I had a huge major plumbing issue in my apartment, which caused my entire apartment to flood. And so I had to like move all my stuff and do things. Like, you're gonna face challenges. It's just a natural part of when you go and do something so big. And so I think like letting it go with the flow, trying to like not be closed-minded, open-minded, I think will go a long way. And when life plays music, like dance, like take advantage of things while you're there.
I love that. And you also did do that. Exactly. So we're almost out of time, and I just want to thank you, Joel and Benjamin, for sharing your stories of your amazing study abroad experiences. You touched on some really important points, you know, about the academics and the rigor and also the cultural impact, and going in with an open mind and really taking in the culture seems to be one of your takeaways from that. I do want to say we have only about 5 more minutes left. So I want to point out, though, that in honor of Hispanic Heritage Month, we were so delighted that we were able to have both of you of Hispanic heritage to do our student panel today. There are lots of other events going on during this month. There's an art exhibit coming up next week at the Tink Media Board, and it's called Thank You for Looking, Children of Displacement. And there's a flamenco as a practice of resilience virtual lecture and workshop on the 2nd through the 6th. La Alianza is having their student org conference on Saturday, October 3rd. There's just lots and lots of things to do. Be sure you go out to campus groups. I also want to mention that there's so much information that we simply did not have enough time to share on this Zoom call today, but please reach out to us. You can come to our Friday forums. This was a Friday forum. We have them every Friday. We cover all different topics in study abroad, everything from studying abroad for majors, particular majors, to where can you study abroad, to finances, how you can study abroad. We have a lot of different things, different ways that you can learn more about it. You can also reach out to us on our Tuesday, Thursday virtual walk-ins from 1 to 3 p.m. That's Tuesdays and Thursdays, virtually from 1 to 3 p.m. You can find that link on our website. Also, I want to mention that you're thinking about how can you afford to study abroad. The Gilman Scholarship application is open right now, and it closes on October the 6th. Please go to the Study Abroad webpage and just look up Gilman Scholarship. You can also go directly to Benjamin Gilman Scholarship and learn more about that scholarship. It does require an essay, so it's not something you can do in the 9th hour before 12 o'clock midnight. That is due. So please take advantage of those. We also have other scholarships on our website for different diverse groups of students. And if you have any questions beyond this, you can reach out to us at studyabroad@case.edu. That's studyabroad@case.edu. We are also encouraging you to follow us on Instagram and Facebook. And we just thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you, Camille, for being in the background. And I think Dr. Polonez Alpizar had to go, but we do hope that you have really taken in all the benefits there is to studying abroad. As you can see, it is such a transformative experience. You're never going to be the same again, and you'll take this with you for the rest of your life. And I'm sure Benjamin and Joel can agree with that. We are here to support you. The Study Abroad team will show you exactly how to go through the application process. We'll also help you with your scholarship essay if you need help with that. There's lots and lots of support available, so please reach out to us. And thank you once again for joining us. Thank you to our panelists for joining us, and I do hope you have a great weekend. It's coming up.